we're talking about the going back to the office and the legislation.
Yes.
So what are you hearing about that? How's that affecting?
Well, that's the question was guided when we did the conversations around AI, and we discovered that what is actually happening on the ground in small and medium-sized businesses was different than what we were hearing. That sparked this curiosity, partly because we're hearing mostly from large organizations, or we're hearing from governments about back to office mandates. And I have 3 sons. They're all in smaller organizations here in Metro and in HRM. And they all have flexible work arrangements to one degree or another. So I'm like, so will we find something different than what we're hearing? And what's been interesting, I've been doing these conversations now. I've talked to dozens of people and in all kinds of work environments. So I don't have the report yet. That's like the next thing on my to-do list. But I've talked to people in fully remote environments where it's been remote from the beginning of the organization. Not everybody is suited to work in fully remote. I've talked to people in hybrid organizations like this one, and it varies quite a bit about what that hybrid looks like. Everything from 2, 3, or 4 days in the office to mandated days in the office to people can figure it out on their own. So all of that, so I'll come back to that in a second. And I've talked to organizations. I have talked to federal government people who are subjected to the back to office. And I've talked to organizations that have been in office the whole time, not a mandate, but an expectation that they would do that. So whatever original expectation I carried into those conversations has expanded. And one of the things that is really clear is no matter what kind of work environment you choose, it's the clarity of what does that look like? And it comes back to leadership, like you were talking about earlier. So what is the leadership saying about what the requirement is going to be for work? So one of the questions I ask pretty much everybody is, what about relationship building? So organizations that operate fully remote, they have strategies in place for building relationship along the way. And it includes things like if they're using a platform like Slack, they've got their project channels and other channels, and they have social channels around that. And they create social times in their virtual meetings and that kind of thing. With hybrid work environments, one of the really interesting things that came out of that for me is I had been thinking about pandemic. Everybody in an office needed to go back and work or needed to work remotely. And I thought, we're so innovative and creative in this. Everything's going to be different post-pandemic because we're going to learn from that, which is why the back to office mandates hit me very curious, like what is going on with that? And in talking to people, they're like, if you didn't have an intention to be hybrid or remote prior to the pandemic, then you don't have that purpose and intentionality going forward, and that partly contributes to the back to the office. So I thought that was really fascinating. And one of the challenges around some of those back to office mandates is they don't actually have the space for everybody.
Yes.
And so when you were talking about inclusion earlier, people don't feel very included or like they belong if they have to cart all their belongings back and forth every time they have to go back to the office, or if they don't have dedicated space, or just things like that. So that's a challenge. And if part of the back to office mandate is beyond the office, in that we want to revitalize our downtown areas, that might be a political motivation for back to office. But as a worker in that environment, people are kind of resentful